an awful lot of people decide it's time for a New Year's resolution. Perhaps they're going to decide it's time to lose weight. Maybe they want to quit smoking. Maybe they decide it's about getting out of debt. When you think about a New Year's resolution, what do you think of as the key criteria for a really successful New Year's resolution? Who give me an idea?
Achievable.
Achievable.
Time sensitive.
Time sensitive. Excellent.
Something that's going to improve myself.
Something that's an improvement. Absolutely.
Challenging.
Challenging. Thank you very much. All of those, I think, are good criteria. And in fact, when I think of a New Year's resolution, I start out with something that I think has to be importantly impactful. And then, because it's probably something that takes a lot of work, there's got to be a committed action as part of this process. Because the goal is a significant change. Have you ever thought about declaring a New Year's resolution for your company? Let me tell you about a client of mine. Richard created his company based on his own personal experience. At age 15, as a high school student, he was invited to Washington, D.C. by his senator for an entire week to learn how our government works. Richard was exposed to the business of civic leadership by using real-world experience. That transformational experience catapulted his career. He became a senator assistant and was able to pay his way to the University of Washington, D.C., a very prestigious university, where he earned a diploma in civics. Richard was out to change the world. Midway in his career, he chose entrepreneurship as his vehicle for changing the world. He decided that he really wanted to form a company that would allow him to share the same kind of experience he had had with high school students, lots of them. He wanted those high school students to also have the experience of the business of civic leadership in real time. And that's what he did. He formed a company that created opportunities for sitting politicians to meet with upstarting young leaders of tomorrow. The kids found this energizing, and their parents felt that this was a very impactful experience that allowed their children to have a once-in-a-lifetime advantage. With customer satisfaction like that, Richard's revenue soared, but his profits plummeted. With $100 million in revenue, Richard had a problem. His revenue had dropped to 5%. Excuse me, his profitability had dropped to 5%. A far cry from the 20% of profitability it had on a much younger company years ago. Clearly, this was a company that was delivering great client satisfaction, but wasn't delivering shareholder satisfaction. Richard decided to declare a company New Year's resolution. The resolution was great shareholder satisfaction. Contained in that New Year's resolution was the opportunity, the promise for a big change. Obviously, Richard's company was precariously teetering with a non-sustainable business model that threatened his company's future. Like a lot of entrepreneurs, Richard began to realize that the business model that had made him successful as a small company might just not be the same business model that was going to make him successful as a much bigger company. But you know, it can be awfully hard to even imagine what else is possible when you created the model in the first place. Richard needed an out-of-the-box solution. He decided he needed to be able to do something that would ensure his success in being able to achieve that resolution. After 2 decades of just tweaking his existing little business model, he decided that this was the year that he was going to challenge his own thinking. And he was going to do it with 3 questions. Question number 1. What do satisfied clients expect? Question 2. What is the bottleneck holding our growth hostage? Question number 3. What's the biggest negative impact depressing our profitability? Richard pondered these ideas deeply. What do satisfied clients expect? Richard concluded that students wanted energy and excitement out of real-world learning experiences. And their parents wanted to make sure that they had credentials that were going to get them into world-class universities and put them on a very healthy position for their careers. What is the bottleneck holding hostage our growth? Richard determined it was about scheduling. You know, 20 years ago, there was never a problem about getting different political officials who were freely offering their time. There were choices. Today, with so many kids, there weren't enough politicians. And worse yet, when they really did schedule, the politicians weren't always predictable. Maybe it was one of their bills that came up, or maybe it was a fundraiser that had priority. Somehow the kids always seem to have the last position on the agenda. The juggernaut problem here was scheduling predictability. The third question: what is the biggest negative impact depressing profitability? Richard knew it was logistics. 20 years ago, it was Richard that would handle all of the logistics of scheduling events in Washington, D.C. for hundreds of students. Today, it takes a small army of 1,000 part-timers to be able to handle logistics, because now that also includes locations in almost all of the 50 capital cities. On top of the logistics of travel, there's all the involvement with the hotels and the airplanes and the buses and chaperoning. We had to protect these kids entrusted to us. Clearly the bottleneck here was the juggernaut of logistics. The answers to these 3 questions made Richard realize there was a timely consideration for some significant change. Based on having a New Year's resolution for his company, he realized he needed to design committed actions to ensure the success of that resolution. Building on his insights from question number 1, what do satisfied clients expect? Richard created a committed action, which was to preserve the gold standard. That gold standard was the energizing and excitement that the kids wanted out of transformational learning, which their parents also believed was part of making a once-in-a-lifetime competitive edge for them. Building on Richard's insights to question number 2, which is, what's the bottleneck holding our growth hostage? Richard's committed action was to create scheduling predictability. He realized it was time to reach out to a wider range of leaders. Leaders with whom he could actually pay to schedule them, to work on his time schedule. He decided he could reach out to people like Nobel laureates, or dignitaries and celebrities in business and finance and marketing and science, even humanitarianists. Building on his insights to the question number 3, which is, what's the biggest negative impact on profitability? Richard's committed action was to explode that logistics juggernaut. His epiphany was that he could actually have all of the kids come to a single venue. You see, over the last 2 decades, it turns out that parents seem to be a lot more comfortable with their kids going to rock star events on their own. So Richard decided that he would take advantage of this process. He would deliver his transformational leadership programs in a rock star template as part of a live extravaganza. Now, he didn't have to just deal with a couple of hundred kids. He could deal with thousands of kids, even tens of thousands of kids. Driven by this New Year's resolution, supported by these committed actions that answer the 3 questions of, what do clients expect? What is holding back our growth? And what's our biggest negative profit impact? He was posing his company in a way for significant results. And what were those results? A completely new business model, updated for today. Not just tweaking yesterday's business model. A business model that would actually position his company to profit from its economy of scale. Instead of another decade of rising revenue and falling profits, Richard's company is on track to exceed its 20% profitability of yesteryear. And best of all, because of the benefit of his projections of $200 million, that's a lot of shareholder satisfaction. Having built on a New Year's resolution and the committed actions to make it happen, Richard is now delivering both customer satisfaction and client satisfaction and shareholder satisfaction. And he now has a business model that is sustainable for tomorrow to ensure that his shareholder value is always in lockstep with his escalating client shareholder value. So what's the most impactful resolution you can make for your company? And what is it worth to you? Let's take a look at these 3 questions for your company.
Thanks, Stefania.